Hello, and thank you for being a part of Raising Me. This is where we take the things that we're facing and trying to navigate as parents right to the experts for advice. We are so excited to share that Raising Me was just named in the top 20 parenting podcasts to follow in 2024 by FeedSpot. You'll find that link in the show notes, but super cool, and we are very grateful. I'm Adrienne Stein, an Emmy Award-winning journalist, though most importantly, I'm a mom of three, a preschooler, a middle schooler, and a high schooler, just trying to figure this all out too. We're talking about sleep today, how to get more of it for your kids, but ultimately, doesn't that mean we get more sleep too? Coincidentally, just last night, we had our youngest come downstairs, this is 2:00 in the morning, mind you, asking if he could cuddle with us. I mean, oh my gosh, how do you say no to that? The problem is no one then gets really any good sleep. And as we'll learn today from pediatrician Dr. Kristy Perkowski, we completely did the wrong thing. I mean, no part of what we did was right, but that's okay. We're going to get some good guidance there. We are also talking about our teens getting more and better sleep. The youngest ones too. Admittedly, we thought we were some kind of superstar parents when our oldest was a baby. This is years ago. She was sleeping 12 hours a night like clockwork by 4 months old. But then our second came along and actually proved we had no idea what we were doing. Look, there's no magic formula here. I'm just going to tell you that. But as Dr. Perkowski shares, there really are some simple things that we can all be doing to get more rest. Dr. Perkowski, I am so glad you're here with us to talk about sleep. We know it's important. We know how important it is. We all feel better when we get it, right? But there are serious health benefits to getting enough sleep. Can we start with that?
I think it's easy to think of your own self and to think of how different you feel after a good night's sleep. And our children are no different. In fact, our children are growing so quickly. They need, even more sleep than adults do, of course. And children that aren't getting adequate sleep just aren't going to be in a good mood. They're crankier, their fuse is shorter. It can cause other really more significant mood disturbances like depression. It can affect concentration in school. And just affect all of their energy level for participating in activities. It affects everything that they do. I think it's fair to say that.
So then that gets to the question of how much sleep do kids actually need? And this is an age-dependent question, but also kind of a kid-dependent question, because just like adults, sometimes you can function on 6 hours of sleep, but there are other times where you need 8, 9 hours of sleep to really reset. But there are guidelines to how much sleep children actually need for their best health.
Absolutely. And that depends on how old they are. So when we're talking about, infants outside in the first 3 months of life, when a baby needs to sleep, the baby is going to sleep. It is not abnormal for a newborn baby to be sleeping 16 to 20 hours a day, which when you think that they're feeding every 2 or 3 hours, their awake time might really only be to feed, change the diaper, and go back to sleep. And that can be normal for the first month or two even. By the time that they're about 4 months old, from the time they're 4 to 12 months old, they're going to need 12 to 16 hours of sleep a night. And that includes the naps. So most babies in that age group would probably be taking 2 or 3 naps during the day. So a total of 12 to 16 hours. Once they're like a younger toddler, 1 to 2 years old, they need 11 to 14 hours of sleep a night. By the preschool years, 3 to 5 years, you're looking at 10 to 13 hours, including their naps. The grade school, 6 to 12 years, they need 9 to 12 hours a night. And teenagers need at least 8 to 10.
Okay. So couple of things on that. Naps. How long should kids take naps before we go into some of the other lines of our conversation here?
That's going to be really dependent on the child. Parents tell me there's a huge variation in what parents tell me work for their children. Some children wake up, and I'm talking about like younger babies now. They wake up, they have a feed, they're alert for a little while, and then they're already back down at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning for an hour or two. And then they'll, wake up and have some alert time during the day and go back down in a couple of hours. If you're talking about the preschool years, like 3 to 5 year olds, and I feel like I think there's two major transitions with naps. One is around 15 to 18 months old. Parents start asking me, when do they drop the morning nap? Most young toddlers are taking like a morning nap and an afternoon nap. Most parents want to know, when do I drop the afternoon nap? And I think or the morning nap. I think that generally happens between 15 and 18 months, but your child will direct that. A sleepy toddler in the afternoon is not fun. So if they need additional rest, you're going to follow their cues. But in general, it's between 15 and 18 months that they drop that first nap.
Right. The second nap, I remember that, and it's different for every kid, right? But I remember for all three of mine, it was like very clear when we needed to get back off that afternoon nap because they wouldn't go to sleep at night. And then we run into that frustration at bedtime.
So the older toddlers that are 3 to 5 years old, that's really dependent. I have parents tell me that their 3-year-old is functioning fine in the afternoon and goes right down to bed without their afternoon nap. In fact, they go to bed much easier without that afternoon nap. But that's why I think the American Academy of Pediatrics gives these ranges for sleep. So if you're talking about a 3 to 5-year-old, it's 10 to 13 hours of sleep a night, plus or minus the nap.
Routines are so key at bedtime, moving beyond naps, but really just getting that solid chunk of sleep at night. What should a good sleep routine look like? And again, this is an age dependent question because I have a feeling for teenagers, it's putting the phone away, right? But when it comes to some of the younger kids, what should a good routine look like?
Well, I think one thing that every parent will agree with is that your child will learn how to manipulate the routine to stay awake long. No, yeah, I know.
No.
So this is where kind of being regimented in your routine and consistent with your routine can just keep it under control. A bedtime routine should not exceed 30 minutes. After that, it's just they want one more story or one more song, or they have to rearrange the stuffies one more time. And, I think that at night, parents are tired too. So it's important to keep that under control. And I would say that a 30-minute routine is appropriate and pretty average. So the American Academy of Pediatrics talks about the brush book bed for the younger kids. You brush and floss to your teeth. You move in for a story or two, you get tucked into bed and say goodnight.
Okay. So that's sort of the younger set. When we get a little bit older, middle school, high school, what should a bedtime routine look like? I know I've talked to moms. A common question is, well, what time does your child go to, what time does so-and-so go to sleep? Because some kids will be out by 9:00 and, in 6th or 7th grade. Others want to stay up till 10 or 10:30, which I don't know, seems late for a middle schooler. And then the same thing with high schoolers. Sometimes kids, go down at 9:30. Others, they're up still at 11 o'clock at night. So what should that look like for the older kids?
I think it's important to acknowledge that during adolescence, there is a disruption in the circadian rhythm. There is a change during puberty when they're getting older. And it's going to feel more natural for these older adolescents or, adolescents in general to go to bed later and wake up a little bit later. So I think and generally speaking, the wake up time is dictated by what time they have to be at school. So what you have to do is kind of look at what time you have to get up for school and know that these adolescents need 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night and kind of go backwards. So things you can do to help if their natural circadian rhythm is to maybe stay up later, things that you can do to help them unwind and help them get ready for bed would be to eliminate screens 1 hour before bedtime. And that's so hard, but there's good reason behind it. The blue light in the screens makes your brain think it's the sunlight and makes your brain not secrete the melatonin that it would start to secrete to help you fall asleep. And so nobody wants their screen off 1 hour before bed, especially the adolescents. But for people that are having difficulty sleeping, this is a really important intervention because your brain thinks it's the middle of the day if it's seeing that blue light. So eliminating that and be really helpful in getting, starting to wind down and get ready for bed. And for that reason, we don't recommend screens in children's bedrooms of any kind. So
even the phone, like, do you say take the phone completely out of the room at night?
yes.
Yes. Okay.
Definitively. Yes. Yes. I think that one strategy that families use is like a family charging station. Our devices go here on the counter, everything gets plugged in, it'll be there for you in the morning, because the temptation when it's in your bedroom is just so great. And then once you pick it up, you're interfering with your own natural melatonin secretion, and now you're having trouble falling asleep, and now you're distracted by the whatever you're consuming on your phone. And we all know that sometimes on social media or other sites that children might be looking at, they might encounter something upsetting or disturbing or something that's going to disrupt their sleep in that way. So it's really a good idea for the devices to be out of the room: TVs, tablets, phones, in a family charging station.
All of it. And, not just the light, but again, as you said, like something you see on social, or you get a text that's get you. And that happens at any age, even for adults too. So one thing that this sort of reminds me of, and I'm hoping you can speak a little bit more to it, is sleep hygiene. That kind of feels like it falls under this term that I've heard called sleep hygiene. What exactly is sleep hygiene?
It's the practices that will help your body to know that it's time to sleep. It's practicing the same routines and being pretty regimented with them. Some people are really flexible and they can sleep well. But, if we're talking to people that are having trouble unwinding and trouble falling asleep and trouble getting the recommended sleep that we spoke to, that's where really falling back on the sleep hygiene. So that's being regimented in your routine and being consistent every day, because now your body knows, like, oh, I've brushed my teeth, I'm in my pajamas, my screen is gone. This is when I like to listen to a meditation or do some gentle stretching or yoga or read something that's relaxing, not like a thriller, but something that can really help your brain unwind and get ready for bed. These are the hygiene practices that we're talking about.
What if, though, our kids still have trouble falling asleep at night? I mean, that happens. Like, I know we've had nights where I feel like we've done all the things, and yet still, who comes to mind is my 5-year-old, is still like raring to go at 7:45 at 8 o'clock at night. What if you do have a child who, at least occasionally, if not regularly, still has trouble falling asleep at night?
I think that you just fall back on these routines and practices. I mean, certainly this is the kind of thing that my patients talk to me about on a regular basis. And it can be very specific to the child, what the exact circumstances are. But your pediatrician would be happy to speak with parents about the specifics of what the challenges for their child might be. But in general, following these sleep hygiene practices that we talked about, most people under normal circumstances can get into a routine where they can get some pretty good sleep. Of course, we all know the days that, I'm trying to think of a good example, child was at a birthday party and got home at 7 o'clock at night. It's going to be harder to unwind. And a lot of patients do ask me about the use of over-the-counter melatonin, and that I don't want to, because that's so specific to a particular patient, I don't want to make any general recommendations about that. But it's something that is helpful to some patients and something that parents could talk to their pediatrician about if they wanted more information.
Okay, that's a good tip there. About waking up in the middle of the night, because I still have a child who sometimes wakes up in the middle of the night and then comes crawling into bed 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, or at 4 o'clock in the morning. What do we do? What is the best practice? And I'll just speak from personal experience, because we're kind of going through this with our 5-year-old. We'll have like 3 or 4 nights where he comes down and like cuddles into bed, and then we'll have like a morning where we wake up and we're like, "Wait, where's Jack? Is he okay? He must have slept through the night. Oh my gosh!" And so thankfully we're in that phase right now. But neither the child nor the parent gets good sleep when the youngster comes crawling into bed. What is your advice for parents when it comes to the littler ones, wanting to be with mom and dad, or mom or dad or whoever at night?
I mean, they want our support, they want our comfort, and we want to give that to them, and you're going to give that to them. I think a lot of small children, younger children, speak to nightmares and bad dreams, and they're the most common between the ages of 3 and 12, and they remember them. And so I think if your child comes in and says, I had a bad dream, validating that, acknowledging that you know what that feels like, that feels terrible when you have a bad dream, but it's not real and everything's okay. And let's get back to your bed. And this is where, if you have really good routines and sleep hygiene established, bringing them back to their bed, they likely will be able to fall asleep easily because they're back in their comfortable room that's, with their comfort stuffy, and they've been reassured by their parent. And you could even read the one short story that you read before bed just to get them back. So usually when parents tell me that their children are coming in the middle of the night, we can all relate to just wanting to roll over and go back to sleep. But I think the best thing to do in that scenario is to bring them back to bed, reassure them, and everyone will get a better night's sleep that way. That's for sure.
And that's more like you're playing the long game. The short game is, yep, just come on in. Let's just all try and get some sleep. I will say too, speaking from, just as a mom of 3, when our oldest, who's now 16 and, she's just fine. When she used to come in, like when she was 3 or 4 years old, we were very regimented. Well, it's not time. Let's go take you to your bed. And we did all the things, right? And then just as the birth order increases, by the time we got to Jack, it's like, we're just trying to get enough sleep. Are there long-term consequences for kind of not doing what we're quote unquote supposed to be doing when your kids wake up in the middle of the night and come cuddling into bed with you? Because I will say too, it's like, I also know how short-lived this phase is. And he is such a cuddly little guy that, sometimes it's like, oh, okay, I'll cuddle with you.
I mean, of course, we all feel that way about our children, and we want to provide that comfort for them. I think I'll speak for myself. I'm also a mother of 3. When I get a good night's sleep, I am a better parent. And
totally.
when I wake up in the morning, when I am fresh and ready, I can be more present for my children. I can make sure we don't miss anybody's snack packed in their backpack, or all of the things. And so I think that, if, like you said, Adrienne, if you're thinking of the long game, being more present for your child, being more rested yourself, and then putting them in a position where they're getting adequate sleep, which will help, as we spoke to before, with focus and attention at school, and with mood, and with, immune system, being able to fight off all of the viruses that we're being bombarded with all the time. So I do think it comes down to the long game and giving them that skill of putting themselves back to sleep. It's normal for children to wake up in the night. And I think this is the one thing that worries parents. Like, why are they awake? What happened? And I think that as we complete our sleep cycles, you've heard of like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 REM sleep. You've heard of this. Every time you complete one of these sleep cycles, you have an arousal in your sleep, and you kind of scan your environment. It's the same as you fell asleep, and you roll over and go back to sleep, and you don't remember it in the morning. A lot of times our children wake up in the night, have these little arousals, and they're thinking, where's mom? She was here when I fell asleep. So they go looking for mom, and that can kind of perpetuate the coming into the parents' room in the night. So,
well, guilty. Okay, fantastic. We're doomed. You kind of talked a little bit about nightmares. Night terrors are also a thing. Can you tell us a little bit of what is a night terror, and, why do they happen?
I don't know that we know why they happen. I don't know. I can't speak to why they happen, but how they differ from a nightmare is the child wakes up, they had this scary dream, they're telling you what happened, they remember it in the morning. The thing about a night terror is that it's really upsetting to the parent, but the child will not remember it in the morning. It's as if the child is awake. Parents describe to me that the kids wake up in bed, they're bolt upright, their eyes are wide open. A lot of times they're crying or yelling, and parents don't know what to do. They can be very difficult to wake up when this happens, and so it's so upsetting to parents. The good news is the child does not remember it, and so they likely will be unaffected by it. But the difference between the nightmares and the night terrors is nightmares seem to happen like after midnight, like later in the night. The night terrors happen early on in the early sleep cycles. And so a lot of times they're happening before parents go to bed. So if the child goes to bed earlier and then the parents are getting things done at home, that's often when the night terrors happen. So a lot of times parents will be awake and around, for it.
Is there a certain age where that tends to happen more often? I'm just thinking back to my own personal experience. Like, I feel like it was around 7 or 8, maybe, for both my two older children. Jack, my little one, it's never happened, but it's happened, at least once, if not twice, with both my daughter and my middle son. Not anymore, but is there a certain age where it tends to happen more often?
The toddlers and the preschoolers are the more likely age for this to be happening. So I think you're maybe a little younger than what you're describing, but in general. And so if your child is having a night terror, you just keep them safe. You just support them. It generally will pass in less. This here says that they can last as long as 45 minutes, but most
Oh my
are
gosh.
shorter. I know that sounds like a really long time. Most are much shorter, and the child will usually fall right back to sleep as soon as it's over. And like I said, won't remember it in the morning. So parents have to stay calm if this happens, make sure their child is safe. And if it's something that's happening repeatedly or often, definitely talk to your pediatrician about it.
I remember the first time with our first child that happened, and we were like, what is happening? And, so we're like searching online, what is going on? And, thankfully she's fine. And to your point, like, didn't remember a thing. And this was many years ago, but it is really unsettling the first time that happens, especially for new parents, right?
So I think knowing that this can happen in this age group should hopefully be reassuring.
Totally. But still crazy. Like when you come into your child's, they look like they're wide awake. They're so upset. What about sleep disorders? Like, can there be sleep disorders in children? And how do you spot that?
So parasomnias is the medical word for sleep disorders. And, for some children that can be like sleepwalking. Night terrors actually count as a parasomnia. But I think one of the common ones that parents ask me about is children that snore, and whether or not they're having like a sleep apnea in their sleep. So this is a really common question from parents. They'll say, gosh, they snore so loud at night, and I'm wondering if that's okay. And it's tricky because not all children that snore have sleep disordered breathing and have a sleep apnea, but some children who snore do. And so usually when parents raise the concern of snoring, I'll ask about their child's alertness during the day. Do they seem drowsy or fatigued? Are they falling asleep on the car ride home from school? For older children, are they taking a nap? Children that generally have long outgrown a nap, those can all be signs that the quality of their sleep is poor. So if you have a child that snores and you do have concerns about the quality of their sleep, that's a great question for your pediatrician.
Okay, great. I mean, I think the reality is like that we're all trying to figure this out, and every kid is so different. I mean, I'm sure that you experienced this with your own children, Dr. Perkowski, but I remember we brought our first child home, and by 3 months, she was sleeping 12 hours a night, like clockwork, 6 to 6 or 7 to 7. And we thought we had this figured out. Like, we must be amazing parents. And then child 2 comes along. We kind of do the same things, right? And he didn't sleep through the night until he was like 9 or 10 months old, like when we were ready to like just bang our heads into a wall and trying to figure this out. So, what advice would you have for parents if you just had to pick one piece of advice when it comes to helping your kids get healthy sleep, which in turn I feel like helps us as parents get healthy sleep?
Well, modeling it, making it a family priority. In this house, our rest and recovery is important, and we are all better people when we sleep well. And so I think that parents that are complaining of, I was up until midnight, or I was up binge watching this show, or, our children are listening. They hear that. They feel like they're missing out. We made them go to bed and you stayed up and watched a movie, And so I think that showing that it's really important in this family that we get our adequate rest, because we are our best versions of ourselves when we are rested, and modeling that behavior will probably go the farthest. And by modeling that behavior, you're going to help the children to maintain the sleep hygiene that we spoke to, and maintain the routines, and have the practices. Putting our own screens away 1 hour before our children go to bed would probably help all of us with our sleep and our being present with our families and all of the things. So I think that's really important. The other piece of advice that I always give the parents of newborns is sleep when the baby sleeps. That is, I know that sounds
easier said than done.
Everyone said that, but I don't know, cleaning the whatever room, or that can wait. When your baby is, just home from the hospital, they need to wake every 2 to 3 hours to feed, period. And so sleeping when that baby sleeps is the best way to take good care of yourself during a time when everyone is more sleep deprived than they want to be.
Oh my gosh. I remember walking into a wall with the stroller because I was just like in a daze. That's great advice. Dr. Perkowski, thank you so much. I just want to mention too, we'll have additional resources on our website, wgme.com/raising me. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation today. I got to go get some sleep.
All of us, exactly.
A few takeaways here. First, there was no hesitation from Dr. Perkowski when it comes to removing phones from the bedroom at night. And admittedly, we're not so good with that. They're usually on our nightstands in sleep mode or even airplane mode. So we're working on it. We do have our teen completely shutting hers off by 9 or even earlier than that. And even our middle schooler, he doesn't have a phone, but he is a big reader and often reads on his iPad. So we've actually cut that out for nighttime reading too. I do love the idea of a family charging station. That was a great takeaway. As for the occasional, 5-year-old crawling into our bed at 2 o'clock in the morning to cuddle, clearly we have some work to do there. We'll get there. Ultimately, I'm just much more aware of the routine. It does get more difficult the more kids you add into the mix. Of course, there are different activities and schedules, but we now know the importance of that and are just being so much more mindful of it. Thank you for listening to Raising Me. I'm Adrienne Stein. This episode is edited by Megan Littlefield and produced with Nate Eldridge. If you have a topic you'd like us to take on, we'd love to hear it. Email us, raisingme@wgme.com. And of course, please give us a follow wherever you get your podcasts. Wherever you are, I hope you learned something new and get to take a little time for you.